Hello everyone, and welcome to the second webinar of Being a Manager Leader in a VUCA World, a short course presented by IT Masters and Charles Sturt University. My name is Guy Coward, and I'll be your MC. Your mentor is Kath Atring. Before we begin the usual housekeeping, we encourage the asking of questions and the use of chat during the webinar. We hope that you send all your questions relevant to course content to the Q&A section, and that you send all administration type questions, things like dates and times and resource availability, for example, to the support team in chat. You can chat with panelists only, or to all your fellow students as well, and I hope you do. And you can make that choice by toggling through the drop-down box once you've opened the chat log. There are usually some very experienced industry-based attendees who are often very helpful with any queries you may have, or can augment the discussion that we're having. We'll also have Q&A sessions periodically, and if a question is particularly relevant, I'll interject in the course of the webinar. Hannah, as usual, is around in an administrative and technical support role for IT Masters, and is also responsible for the learn.itmasters.edu.au website, or the Moodle page, or the course page, whichever you want to call it, which is where you'll find the materials needed for this course. Links to all the readings, discussion forums, and quizzes. They're all open now for the second module. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact us using the details on that page, or just chuck a note in the chat and we'll try and answer it. Quick sticks. Finally, Kath, tonight I believe we'll talk a bit about CSU and the MBA at the end of the webinar, so hang around for that if you're keen. Anyway, we'll find out about more of that later, but for now, we'll go through the content. So can you please say again, g'day, Kath.
So, hello everybody, and thanks for coming along again to our presentation tonight. This week we're going to be looking at leadership. So I thought I'd start as usual with a Dilbert cartoon. So last week we saw previously that the leader managers are faced with an increasingly disrupted, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world, and there's a number of great big challenges that are facing them, such as an interconnected but slowing global economy, disruption, an ever-accelerating pace of change, some global issues around trade, entrepreneurship and innovation being major challenges as well. And all of this occurring in the face of major global climate and ecological constraints, so another great big challenge. So I think I like to quote Hugh Mackay, who's a social researcher in Australia. He says, increasingly we yearn for leaders who can tell us a guiding story, who can explain us to ourselves, who can offer us a vision of where we might be heading and why the journey is worthwhile. So we're increasingly frustrated about all of these challenges and what we do in the face of them. And sometimes what we're looking for is somebody else to take us along that path. Now, what I'm going to challenge you with today is that maybe that person is you, and maybe it's all of you. But I think this is a really good cartoon from Dilbert. It reminds us that really there's no perfect panacea and there's no perfect way to approach leadership. I can tell you what I think leadership in the VUCA world should look like, but am I right? Obviously, you've got to take from this what you think is useful and relevant and make your own judgment. But I do think what's clear is that our ideals of what a leader is changing. And I think we're seeing that with things like Greta Thunberg being the Time Magazine Person of the Year, different styles of leadership in some of the major world figures like Jacinda Ardern, or even the Canadian President Justin Trudeau, versus the sort of Trump and Putin models, or even Scott Morrison. There's lots of different leadership models out there. Which one is best is up to you. And just on the, thousands of leadership books, Amazon lists over 500,000 books with leadership as a key word. And I would say that probably a fair proportion of them are written by white males from Western countries. Not that they're not good leaders, just that they're not the only people who can provide leadership. Okay, so I'm going to start off with what is the difference between management and leadership, because this is often something that comes up quite frequently in discussions about management and leadership. I think these visuals highlight some of the differences that people, I don't know if they highlight the differences that people see. I think they clearly delineate the way leadership is shown to be different to management. So management is often seen as somebody at the front telling the workers what to do, whereas leadership is somebody at the front where everybody's following that person along. So I just thought I'd start off with a poll and ask people, would you describe your immediate supervisor as a manager or a leader?
And I should say these are completely anonymized.
Yes.
And it's a
And we
nice
won't
even
tell your boss.
split. Yeah, well, I mean, maybe that's the more important thing. We could find out who you are. I'm terribly sorry. But yes. Ooh, okay. Manager's sort of pulling away, which is a bit sad. Maybe.
Okay.
That's a judgment call. But anyway, about 60% manager and 40% leader, and about 75% of attendees, of which there are 125, have voted so far.
Okay.
I'll end the poll and share it so that you can all see it for yourselves, 60-40.
Okay, so I do think, you know, that things are changing, and you know, hopefully when you show leadership, your people around you will see you as a leader, not necessarily manager, but being a manager is an important job as well. So I won't go through these these various visuals, because they're available off the site and you can peruse them at your leisure. But I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the differences between leadership and management as seen in the literature. So one of the sort of things put forward about leadership is that leaders ignite vision, inspire and motivate others to follow and commit to their vision. Whereas managers are the ones who then allocate work and resources to team members to achieve outputs. And managers are often seen as those who monitor and control systems, budgets, processes and staff to ensure that they're achieving their goals. I kind of think, yes, okay, I can see that managers do that, but from my perspective, I think leading is a function of management. And when we teach management in universities, we teach 4 functions of management: planning, organising, leading and controlling. And under leading is motivation, it is team management, it's a range of other sort of areas. And it's always been a big function of management leadership. It's been a very important component of management, because management is about harnessing the resources of people. So when people take on a responsibility for a team of people, the success, well-being and professional development of that team is a big challenge to take on. So increasingly in a new millennial workplace, people want to understand where the organisation is going. So that vision is obviously important as well from their manager, and they want to know where the importance, what is the importance of them in the organisation, and they want to believe that the value of system of the company is aligned to their own value system. So I kind of think that being a manager is all about showing people that strategic part, the planning side, sharing that vision, and then managing people to get to that area. So I kind of see leadership and management as quite intertwined. But I also want to stress that I see leadership as an action, not as a position, and that anyone can bring leadership to a situation. What is clear, I think, is that the old command and control style of leadership is dead, if it ever was relevant. And perhaps it is, if it still exists, it's more suited to an environment where change is emergent, not disruptive, and where competitors are known, workplaces are fairly homogenous, not multicultural and diverse like they are today. Because today's leadership really does need a lot more flexibility, creativity, participation from all people, and innovation. And so I just thought, because we did, oh no, I can't get the next slide. Let me just see how I can move on next. Okay, here we go. So we did sort of subtitle this topic, is Batman still relevant in a VUCA world? And I borrowed this analogy from Naomi Nash, who is a Charles Sturt University graduate. She's also co-author of a book with another person called Peter Calder and another person called Sophie Patterson, called Rethinking Leadership.
It's a great question.
Pardon? You got a question?
It's a great question. No, it's a great question. I really like it.
Okay, is Batman still relevant? So what Naomi sort of like uses the Batman analogy as that sort of superhero leadership ideal. So I think often in organisations, and we all do it, we often look for a saviour. So if you go through a horrible change situation and a total disruption of your organisation, and that person who led that leaves, the next person that comes in, everybody hopes is going to fix that. They're going to make it better. And so I think we all kind of look for a superhero in leadership. But there's two main problems with that. Number one is really you set that person up to fail because you have really high expectations of them, and they can't always fix it, and they can't always bring it back to what it was, and so therefore, you know, they're going to fail, and then they're going to be you know, seen as really disappointing. But number two, what happens to Gotham City when Batman disappears and it has a crisis? I think the thing about Gotham City is that nobody knows how to fix it other than Batman. Two people have raised their hands. Possibly going to say something along that same lines as well. So I think what is really important is that Gotham City doesn't learn to solve its own problems. It doesn't harness the power of the collective, and it needs to rely constantly on Batman. And so there is a big problem with that kind of superhero leadership approach that we've kind of seen as, I guess, a little bit popular in past leadership theories and approaches. Guy, are there any questions we should deal with before I move on?
Yeah, there's just one from Oguzhan asking about, you know, different contexts for management and leadership, not necessarily a business owner or a manager, but maybe a teacher, trainer, a coach, parent, or even, you know, spouse. Would they be examples where you could sort of make that distinction?
I don't know about spouses. In our household, we have two methods of doing things: the Atri way and the Oates way.
Okay. And which are you? Are you a manager or a leader?
There's a lot of negotiation. I do think that different situations call for different approaches. And I was wondering if anybody was going to help bring up the whole crisis leadership issue, because post bushfires, that's also always been a really relevant thing that, you know, sometimes people raise. I think crisis leadership is quite different to ongoing leadership, and there are certain things that you look for in a leader in a crisis situation. So you look for clear direction, you look for information. You're not expecting so much of a participatory leadership style in a crisis situation. You want to know what's going on, when it's happening, who's doing what, and you know, what the efforts are. So, you know, there are differences, but for ongoing leadership, I think, and obviously cultural differences will come into play. I did actually work as a leader in Indonesia for about 4 years. And while people didn't directly challenge my decisions in a team meeting, I knew when I got something wrong, because gradually, one by one, they'd come to my office and have a little chat. And so while I was still, you know, publicly setting the direction, there still was participation and input from others. And they have a word for it as well, musyawarah, which I think that's the right word anyway, if my Indonesian still serves me right. Yeah, so I do think it's different for different situations, and that some situations do call for different approaches. And you see people successful in one area and really not in another. Okay, so I'm going to move on here because I just talked about the idea of leadership being an action. And this comes from Calder, Nash and Patterson, and they really stress that leadership is an action and leadership is what a group needs to achieve a shared purpose, and that anyone can contribute to leadership. And what they suggest is that for a leadership function to work well, we need to gain contribution across a number of dimensions. So no one person can bring everything to leadership. And so some people can bring, they're better people, and they bring that ability to listen and connect with people, engage with others. Other people are very good at the vision, the inspiration, the strategic direction, and that ability to inspire, envision and empower, but also to tease out different scenarios. And then some other people are very good at the structure. And I noticed on the forum, there was a question from Michael from Ireland, was about the issue of structure in agile environments. And I think, I'm not sure if you meant organisational structure there, Michael, but what this talks about is things like boundaries, about policies, processes, procedures. People do need this to be able to follow, to know how to act. And so some people are very, very good at that, but in amongst the safety dimension is the how do we communicate all that? So is it through a wiki? Is it through an intranet? Is it through regular updates? Is it through team meetings? All of that sort of thing. And so obviously the vision direct dimension is different to the strategic dimension. I think I'm not bad on the people dimension. I think I'm okay on the purpose dimension. I'm okay on the strategic dimension, but I know that my real weakness is the safety dimension. I'm not interested in writing rules and regulations and procedures, but some people are very, very good at that, and they need that to be able to move forward. I don't. So I'm kind of interested if people want to have a go at saying which of their dimensions do they think might be the weakest, and Guy's going to put up a poll on that.
Alrighty, so which dimension do you think is your weakest? People, purpose, safety, or strategic?
Yeah, I see a lot of people there like me, the safety dimension. I think it's
really
always
interesting question.
Really useful to know where your weaknesses are, because then you can look for people who can complement you on this, and you can bring them in and say, right, I'm not so good on understanding what's going on the people side. I need you to be able to go out there and tell me what's the lay of the land in terms of, you know, how people are reacting. Maybe you can go and canvass them and come back to me. So you can utilize people who have those skills, and that is leadership, to identify where your weaknesses are and utilize resources to be able to fill those gaps. Okay.
Really interesting split. We've got, I'll end the poll now and share it.
Yeah.
25% people, only 12% purpose, 46% safety, and 17% strategic. My initial thought was purpose for me. So yeah, really interesting.
Okay. All right. I'll just get rid of that poll off my screen. All right. So I'm going to move on and talk about, so I have a bit of a next. Okay. I'm going to talk about skills in leadership. And so back in 1955, so in the sort of early days of, not early days, I mean, I guess leadership and management as a study began about the 1890s, but say the mid 20th century, Robert Katz published an article in the Harvard Business Review identifying 3 sets of skills that all leader managers require to succeed. And he termed these conceptual skills, human skills, and technical skills. And these are still relevant in today's organisation. And I think they're relevant whether you're in a public, private, or not-for-profit. But their relative importance is changing a little bit in the VUCA world. So technical knowledge in a field is less important at the manager-leader level if you have skilled technical people in your team that you can rely on, or if those technical knowledge can be sourced through artificial intelligence. Conceptual skills are still required to see the whole organisation and its relationship with its operating environment and its future direction. So really that's a harder skill to outsource, that conceptual skill, and a harder skill for technology to really replace, although elements it probably can. But human skills are the thing that are becoming increasingly important for the manager leader in the VUCA world. So because technological innovation disruption have they have two key impacts on organisations. Number one, they automate routine practices, and that reduces the number of people employed in low-level routine tasks, and also they bring the world closer. So, you know, in the Industrial Revolution, people left the village to seek employment in new industrial hubs. In the digitally connected world, people can stay in the village and yet work in a multinational conglomerate. So the human side of that, of bringing all those people together, is a really critical skill in the digitally connected world, because you've got these dispersed teams that aren't in the village or the one centre together. So I think the key issue is, how do you motivate those dispersed members and foster a productive and collaborative team culture which is aligned with organisational strategy to achieve those organisational goals? And how do you deal with the moral dilemmas associated with the rapid pace of change? So I think that the really important things that are, and this is what myself and a lot of theorists argue, that in the VUCA world, it's those skills associated with human interactions that become increasingly important. So they're things like trust, communication. Communication is so important. Collaboration, adaptability, empathy, self-awareness. Self-awareness is a really good leadership skill. But also a strong moral code, and I would argue a commitment to ecological and social sustainability. But we're going to have what we're going to do, look now, so this is the skills. Now I'm going to move on and talk about leadership theories, and some of the leadership theories the various leadership theories that are out there, and focus in on some of the more contemporary ones which are relevant for the VUCA world. So this is a snapshot of leadership thinking, and each of the leadership thinking areas has benefit. So in the 1890s to 1900s is when you saw the Industrial Revolution happening. And so that's when we had a lot of the command and control style of leadership. But even people like Henri Fayol, who were around at the time, and Mary Parker Follett, they were still very concerned with the human dimension of leadership. What we did get was the scientific management aspect of leadership, which broke tasks down into component parts, and was the start of the automated, automated factory manufacturing processes. And Frederick Taylor's obviously associated with that. Scientific management is still very much used today, and there's no reason that scientific management can't sit alongside a more human, sort of people-centered approach. And then in the 60s, we got more in touch with our touchy-feely side. We brought in things like organisational psychology, behaviour, motivation, and all of those theories. And we looked at what it is that make people tick, and how to reward them so that they, set goals for them so that they achieve and are motivated and are productive in the workplace. And then in the 80s to 90s, we got into the transformational leadership and organisational culture area of leadership. Sorry, I'm just going to consult my notes to make sure I haven't left anything out. And that was kind of about setting the vision, seeing the future, because it's the start of things changing and start of things starting to change at a more rapid pace, because this is when we see technology being adopted. And so, the whole thing about where are we going, what's the future, started to come on board. And then from the 2000s, we've had the more contemporary models, and these are the ones I'm going to look at today, because I can't cover everything. We have this is one topic in a in one subject that I'm covering. We have whole subjects on leadership, and we even have a whole degree on leadership. So there's so much you can study in relation to leadership. But let's just have a look in at, I'm going to look at servant leadership, eco-leadership, and e-leadership. And we'll just take a bit of a dive into those. So let's start with servant leadership, and this is the whole sort of flip leadership theories on its head type approach, and it's the idea of a leader in the traditional sense being somebody who serves the people rather than directs and leads the people. So it's the move away from the command and control approach, which saw people as part of the process of production and customers as problematic because they didn't like your product and what's wrong with them. And it moves away from that sort of Henry Ford approach of, you know, like you can have any colour you like as long as it's black, sorry, to now where customers are part of the valued stakeholder decision-making discussion process, and they're integral to the organisation, and employees are resources and they're valued and they're trained and they're kept and they're empowered. So under servant leadership, leaders transcend self-interest to serve others and the organisation. And so I guess I'm just wondering, and I know I can't actually get this question answered, but I'm guessing a few amongst you wouldn't understand why I've got the picture of Michael Caine. Sorry, my daughter's going to run past. Thank you. Can you go away?
No, more daughters. More.
She loves to be
This is a family business.
So the picture I've got of Michael Caine is him in his character as Alfred Pennyworth. And Alfred Pennyworth, I think, is a classic, if we're extending the Batman analogy further. Alfred Pennyworth is Batman's butler, and here's the classic example of the servant leader. He does everything to serve Batman and to make sure that Batman actually is doing well and performing well, and, you know, that Gotham City is ultimately well off as a result of it. So, so the idea is that they give away power, ideas, recognition and credit. They operate on two levels: for the fulfillment of subordinates' goals and needs, and to achieve the larger purpose of the organisation. They place value in trust in people, encourage trust, share power, recognise and support others, and encourage creativity and innovation. And I think this is particularly useful in a VUCA world where collaboration, innovation, creativity and varying individual strengths need to be harnessed collectively to achieve transformational change. If you're just telling people what to do, you're not going to get ideas. But if you're, like, you know, enabling and empowering them to be able to do their best, and then you're going to get a good outcome. So, I just thought I'd expand a little bit on that idea of empowerment. And I really love this particular approach to understanding what giving away power or empowering people does. So traditionally, if you let somebody go to a meeting on your behalf, or if you let somebody take control of a process, there's often a view by managers that that's my job and I'm giving it away, as though power and leadership is like a pie and you actually are carving off a piece of it, and then, you know, you won't get it back. But actually what happens is that when you do empower people and you know, give them the opportunity to fly, you actually improve or increase your own power and your own leadership, because those are the people that you're leading and they are doing awesome stuff. So it's a testament to your good leadership that they are actually doing so well. So to empower others, you need to really create an environment of cooperation, information sharing, discussion, and shared ownership of goals. And I don't know how many of you have worked in a place where the manager or the leader is the bottleneck. Like, everything has to go through them. They have to make all the decisions, and they just slow up the process the whole time because they've got too much to do and they won't give away any of that work or delegate it to someone else. It's an incredibly frustrating and very sort of slow-moving environment. So encouraging other people, oops, Guy has put up a poll.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all right. I think that's probably something we can, yeah, let's vote on this now. Do you feel empowered in your workplace to make discretionary decisions?
Sorry, Kath, and hello again.
I'm really glad to see people are saying always, usually, okay, and that rarely and never are the smaller amount, but we're not at the end yet. 83, 86.
Does it matter about intent, Kath? Like,
oh
you know,
yeah,
if someone chooses, to be an empowering boss, because it results in better outcomes for the business. Like, is that different to someone doing it because it's the right thing to do, or do you think like though you can even separate the two?
So I think some people really do, I think some people are very strategic and very Machiavellian, and they do actually like hoard power because they want to guard their own position. So whether they do it subconsciously or consciously. I've always been one to share knowledge. Like, I don't care, like I've done it, people share it. If they improve it, I can learn something from them. So I suppose personality is a big factor. It could be the culture of the organisation makes them worried, and that, they could get like past practices have shown that, somebody who did that got like heavily punished. So there's so many factors that impact on that. We do look at culture, one of our later topics, but yeah, culture plays a big part. Risk, so there are limits, obviously. So the whole sort of bank financial crisis, not bank financial crisis, the current Banking Royal Commission, some of that where people have been allowed to make decisions and do really poor practices wasn't adequately controlled, and the risk was about making money, not about caring about people. So, there is, obviously empowerment has to be managed in a framework that has, I think, well structured policies and procedures, and people know how to follow them, and are encouraged to follow them. Yeah. So empowerment, it's about that ability to make decisions within guided frameworks, about being able to use new knowledge to actually achieve outcomes and not always have to wait for somebody higher up to give you permission. It's about letting other people design solutions instead of making the decisions yourself, and being able to step back and trust people to do things, because sometimes, while it can be nerve-wracking to think, what if they get it wrong, you can't always be there every time, and it's good to know that somebody can do that if you're not able to. Somebody can step in if something happens to you. But the other obviously really important part of empowerment is give them credit. I think it sounds really, really good if you say, this is Michelle's work and she's done an awesome job and I'm really proud of her, and she's, she should be really acknowledged for the work she's done. Like, as a leader, if you say that, not saying, oh, yes, Michelle did this under my direction, and yes, you can see she's done a really good job of doing what I told her to do. It really sounds a little bit quite different.
Yeah. That poll we're sharing now, 16% of people always feel empowered in the workplace to make discretionary decisions, 38% usually.
That's good.
29% occasionally, 14% rarely, and only 3% never. So that seems fairly nice.
Yeah, that's good. And I think usually is really good anyway, because I think, there are times when you want to check it, when you do want to make sure somebody else is involved. So yeah, it's good. Okay, so moving from servant leadership, the next Oh, I'm looking at the time, guy. We're getting towards the end. The next leadership theory that has contemporary emerged in the sort of like recent years is this e-leadership theory, which is really E as in terms of, you know, email and IT and all that sort of thing. So e-leadership is really the approach which looks at new ways of working, such as telecommuting, temporary dispersed teams, virtual teams, and how you lead and with those enormous challenges of balancing structure and accountability with flexibility. So at Charles Sturt University, you know, I'm working with people who are at Wagga, who are Albury, who are at Bathurst, who are at Port Macquarie, who are in Sydney and who is in Melbourne. I mean, Guy's in Melbourne, I'm in Bathurst. So we have to learn how to work with our colleagues across dispersed environments. Sometimes people are in all sorts of locations, students are in all sorts of locations. So it is challenging when you can't get everybody into the room together. And so with effective e-leaders, I think the really important thing is to be a strong communicator. You need to set clear goals and expectations and timelines around the coordination and delivery of work. There's going to be no room for, I thought I told them that. It has to be absolutely that sort of, what do you call it, active listening, where you say, right, I need you to do this and I need you to do this by then. And then you go back to them and say, right, now tell me what you're going to do to get to that point. And, you know, can you break it down to me? How are you going to get through these? What steps will you go through first to get to the last point? And, you know, how can you be sure that you're going to be able to get that back to me on that time? Because you can't be tapping them on the shoulder every, you know, twice a day as you pass by their desk to say, how's it going? Do you need, you know, do you need anything or anything like that? So the communication is really important, but trust in people to do that and to deliver. And if they don't deliver, then that obviously showing them the impact of that, you know, what that has meant to the organisation, to their colleagues, in a learning way initially. Obviously, it could become a performance management issue, but in a learning way, saying, right, now when you didn't deliver, here's the ramifications. We won't be able to do this. The client was really thinking, it's cost us this. I can't keep you as a member of my team unless you can actually be part of it. So what do you need to be able to perform at this level? It's that really, you know, you're still empowering them, you're getting them a part of the process, but communication and clarity is really, really crucial when you're dealing with dispersed teams. But leaders also need to make sure that workers feel included and part of the organisation. So can you have little rituals? Can you have virtual morning teas once a month? Can you all get online? I know it's hard if you've got different hours, but, you know, is 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock somewhere else? Or can you do, we did a great little thing with e-cards when somebody left recently, where everybody just got on and put, you know, something on the e-card and the person was able to read it on their last day. You could do that around birthdays or something like that, or around, you know, cultural rituals like Ramadan or Diwali or Chinese New Year. So I think it's really important to try and identify ways that people feel part of the team and feel that people actually acknowledge who they are, where they're from, and, you know, what's happening in their world. So those are really important things in that e-leadership approach. But also, you need to be open-minded, solutions-focused, have strong communication, coaching and relationship skills, and use technology to enhance and foster human interaction, not replace it. So use a video for some of your meetings, you know, don't do everything by email, call them up. I think I often, like, if ever I get a bit of a nasty email, I always think the best approach is to ring that person up and say, oh, look, I've got your email. I just can see you're a bit concerned about this issue. Can, you know, let's talk through it. Because relationships are really important. And, you know, fostering relationships is really important. The other thing, obviously, is, you know, that shared purpose and clarity around what are you all working towards? What does the organisation mean? What is important to the organisation? So, yeah, so clear purpose and priorities, it's really important. Okay, I'm going to move on. The last of our contemporary leaderships, no, second last, is eco-leadership. And this is Simon Weston. He's a very popular scholar at the moment. It's a sort of, some of you might have done like systems, open systems theory. So it's the idea that leadership is part of an interconnected whole, and that, you know, we're not just leading teams within the workplace, but we're leading teams within a workplace which is part of a larger organisation, which is part of the community, which is, you know, having an impact on social and ecological environment. And so it is a big picture. And so that, you know, as a leader, he kind of sees that in his model, leaders have 4 main areas or qualities that they need to focus on. And one is the connectivity and interdependence. So what we talked about the E-leadership, there's some parallels there. You know, people need to be connected, they need to be part of the whole, but they need to understand how they're interdependent and how they're interdependent with the environment as well. And then the systems ethics is concerned with acting ethically in the human realm and protecting the natural environment. So that's looking at ethical issues such as outsourced workers, climate change, but also, you know, a whole load of moral and ethical things like about how you behave and what decisions you make in the workplace. And then he looks at leadership spirit, which is it's basically values beyond material gain. So paying attention to things like community, spirituality, the unconscious, creativity and imagination. And then he looks at organisational belonging, so how the organisation interacts with the social fabric of the community, and how the organisational purpose fits in with its wider environment. So I think the thing about this one, it's quite deep, and you know, you can do a whole 12 weeks on this type of approach, but it's basically, it's moving leaders away from profit to purpose and people, and it's moving management approaches away from control and hierarchy to networks and influence. And the skill set is again away from the technical and hard skills, more on the soft skills such as motivation, influencing, delegating, communication, collaborating. So that's really what his approach is. And I just want to say something here with relation to his whole idea of the organisation, the leader being part of the community and its impact on the social and ecological environment. You might think that that doesn't matter, but I wonder, because you're seeing some examples of it happening now, is that past practices, people are actually being held accountable for past practices now. And there's 2 really good examples of that. So Harvey Weinstein, in the past, it was okay to sexually harass women, and that was just men, and, you know, it was part of the game and all that. But the whole Me Too movement has changed the way people can act in the workplace. And now, you know, people who might have harassed somebody thinking it was okay because it was part of the culture by, you know, putting their hand on a part of their body inappropriately, they could be reported now, even if that was like 20 years ago. The same with the other big case is Johnson & Johnson with its opioid addiction case in the US. So they knowingly pushed these, I can't even think of the name of it at the moment, but basically drugs that people easily got addicted to, encouraged GPs particularly in Ohio, that's where the class action has come about, to really prescribe this drug to people, and people got horrendously addicted. And now J&J are in court and having to pay, I think it's probably a lot less than the profit they made, but I think it's a $20 million lawsuit so far. Now, that's what's happening now. In 20 years' time, will organisations be taken to court because of their poor what do you call it, ecological practices? So, you know, you might not think that that matters because it doesn't matter now, but you've got to think about the future. Okay, so the last thing is whole moral leadership, and I think this is all the theme that you're seeing. Moral leadership is underpinned by values, and values obviously describe the principles or standards that we live by, the things we regard as important, and they're formed and held deeply, whether we realise this or not. And they're often at the heart of organisational culture. They're usually stable, but may change over the course of your life. So, you know, a classic example of that could be, you know, people who thought homosexuality wasn't, you know, a good thing, but over time, you know, have changed their stance on that because, you know, they've realized, because they've got close to people who are from the LGBTI community, and they realize that, you know, they've got that there's no difference in people or something like that. So people's values can change over time. It does happen, but they are usually stable and they don't change overnight, so they take time to change. They shape how our priorities and the decisions we make. And so obviously within an organisation, I think a values-based leadership approach is really about understanding what your values are and leading with those values and making it really clear that values are important in the workplace, and using that when you're faced with moral dilemmas. And I think one way and we obviously can't do that here. If we were in a classroom or something else, we might be able to do it. But one really useful way of thinking about your values is to write down 3 words that you would like others to use to describe your leadership. And I did this a while back, and I wrote down those words and I didn't keep them. And so I did it today before I started the class. And I wonder if they're the same as the 3 I wrote down like a year ago. But I sort of thought empathic, authentic, and open were my 3 words that I thought of tonight. And I guess I don't want to get results at the expense of people. So that's a really key point about my leadership. I want to get results and work with people to get results. So that's something that I think it's really important to be empathic, to listen to people, to like empower people, to be authentic and be true to yourself and what you think is right and wrong, and understand how you want to lead and back yourself. Sometimes that's what people say, that they get most out of a leadership subject or course, is that they learn to back themselves. Okay, what is the time? I think, oh yes, we've got 10 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, we're going okay.
Yeah, we're going okay.
And also, yeah, we've had some people type in their 3 words in the chat.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, so Nick King, for example, has typed in honest, authentic, and energetic.
Okay, energetic's a great one. Yeah, because that's inspiring. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, we've got all sorts of people typing in now. Ethical, effective, and sensible.
Effective,
integrity,
good.
honest, approachable.
Nothing wrong with sensibility. Approachable.
Sense and sensibility, pride and prejudice.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to intervene here for a moment. Can you stop, please?
Well, we could all help if you like. We've got fair, caring, and visionary, authentic, genuine, and considered.
Sorry, I was intervening with my daughter walking back and forth,
no,
not with
okay.
me. Yeah.
And Hannah, if it's okay, I'd like to share yours. We've got Swaggy, Swagmaster, and Ultra Swag.
Oh, okay. Okay,
it's a kind of leadership.
Based. Okay, swag is pretty good. Is pretty important for Hannah. Okay. Oh, that's good. Yeah, and I think that's probably write them somewhere and put them up there, just a bit of a reminder to yourself.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep we post the chat log to the Moodle page, so you can look at all of your course on the course page. It'll all be there.
Okay, so then just to finish off, I went back to the whole skills thing because, I know people want to know what skills they need in leadership. And so I thought, well, if I just Google skills for a manager leader in a VUCA world, or, I forget my actual search criteria, but these are 2 of the snapshots I came up with. And I think they're quite interesting because you can see that communication skills, listening skills, critical thinking skills, and interpersonal skills, while they've said human skills are in demand and they're calling all of those human skills, I think I would put critical thinking skills in the conceptual skills if we go back to Katz. So if we remember, Katz's skills were technical, human, and conceptual, with human and conceptual increasing the further you went up the leadership ladder. So I think it's really interesting that those human skills are still very, very relevant in the VUCA world. Listening skills, probably that's one of my weaknesses. And we'll put up a poll on that in a sec. Because if a lot of things are automated, then what's left is the human side of things. And so what we need to be doing is, you know, talking to each other and dealing with each other as humans. Then this other one that came from the Institute for Corporate Productivity, which I don't know much about, I must say. I should have Googled that as well. This one I thought was quite interesting because I thought it aligned a little bit with Simon Weston with, you know, relationship building and conscientious connector and communicator, informed risk taking. So not just taking risks, but taking risks within boundaries and having done the research. He's got this particular institute's got user of new media because obviously, you know, you need to keep up to date with technology. And then that sort of like omni-channel thinker, so thinking across boundaries, not just within your own organisation. Purpose-driven, here's the thing, it keeps coming up, purpose-driven. Developer of talent, so that empowering others. And then being kind of like knowing the purpose or the vision, culturally agile and mindful, so that sort of focus on spirituality that's emerging in a lot of leadership talk at the moment. Okay, so let's put up our poll, Guy, on which human skill do you think is your weakest?
Alrighty.
So mine is listening.
And it seems a fair few. Oh, no. Well, it's come back to the back. That's good.
Because I'm a lecturer, I talk at people all the time. I have to learn to listen.
It's your job not to listen. Oh, it's a fairly even spread, which is super interesting. Yeah, sort of lowest of 20, highest of 30. So listening is sort of in the lead. Getting all sorts of crazy stuff in the chat about the 3 words still. So that's all.
Oh, great. I've got to export that so I can look at them.
Oh, yeah, we will. And I'm a bit stuffed about the rise of automation, I think. Just putting it out there. So if anyone needs someone.
That's a really good movie.
Yeah.
I really liked that.
Alrighty, wow, it's super even. 19% communication, 28% listening, 25% critical thinking, and 28% interpersonal. Takes all types.
And I bet we can all improve on all of those.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to move on. Okay, so here we are, we're at the end. I think just to summarise, it takes a bit more than just the bat and the cat to work together. I think as a leader, it's important to involve all stakeholders, so customers, your team, people throughout the organisation. It's really important to be that connector and networker and communicator and to, you know, see the bigger picture and, you know, have that wider lens. But it's really important to bring others into the fold, let them have a voice, allow them to bring their skills to the table because they have different skills to you. They might be better listeners, they might be better communicators, they can do that for you. Empower the next generation to act, have clear communication, have a clear united direction and vision, be sure of your values and stick to them. So that's kind of like the sort of summary of all the things I think that we've kind of crossed over tonight. I think it's useful for you to take some time out and reflect on your own values in your life and work and what you stand for, what you believe in. I think that helps you just look at yourself as a leader and think what matters most to me. And if it really is about, you know, getting outputs and, you know, like achieving goals and getting runs on the table, you know that about yourself. And so then you can think, right, well, what's going to help me get that? So I think, you know, there are so many different types of leaders and everybody resonates with a different one. I quite like people like Brene Brown. Obviously I've put up a few people today that, you know, I think are good people to sort of follow, but everybody has their own that they think is best for them. Yeah. Okay. Can you? Sorry, excuse me. Okay. So I think that's really my summary and perhaps the end for today. Next week, we've got the slide for next week. We are looking at strategy and how we can plan and develop and roll out strategy in such a fast changing environment. Excuse me. All right, so we might pause at this point, Guy, to say if people want to leave now, they're most welcome to. Or if they've got any questions they want to ask, do you want to feed them?
Yeah, we've got a few. One from the chat from a little bit earlier talks about, I guess, the role of charisma in all of this. It was pretty contested in the chat. A lot of people were saying it's shallow, and some people are saying no, it's actually a real thing. You know,
it is.
You want to follow someone who is more charismatic than perhaps not.
Well, yeah, I think it helps if we like people. And when I teach organisational behaviour, we have a subject called power, which is one of my favourites. And one of the things we talk about is positional power, which is being appointed, personal power, and forget the other power, our knowledge, which is often power, so being powerful in your discipline area. But personal power is something you can really work on. So how you look, how you smell, being nice to people, talking to people, that is all part of charisma, and personal power is really important. And people don't think that it is, but it's naive to think that it's not important. I mean, you don't have to be gorgeous, and that's what I say to the students. You know, it's not about being gorgeous, it's about being nice. Personal power is about being approachable, being nice, looking presentable, and, you know, like being interesting and friendly and open to people. So charisma often is that. It's that ability to be personal. And there used to be a woman who was a Vice Chancellor of Macquarie University. Her name's Di Yerbury. And when I worked at University of Western Sydney, I was a lowly, I perceived myself as this, lowly sort of officer. But when you spoke to Di Yerbury, she spoke to you as if you were the only person in the room. And she was the Vice Chancellor of a major university. And it made you really like her. At least I didn't work at Macquarie. I'm sure people who worked at Macquarie may have had different perceptions, but honestly, that was real charisma, and that was just that interpersonal thing that I think is really important. And you can learn it. You can say, "Oh, that's not me. I'm not good at that," but you can learn it. You really can.
Well, that's okay. So I guess just doing activities like this and seeking the help and seeking the information would be a good way to learn that. Because Anshu has asked, how can one make a good transition from a team worker to a manager/leader?
Look for opportunities. That's what I say. Look and say, I tell people, I really want to move up. I really want to be able to, learn things so I can move forward. What can I do? Can I, is there something new I can take on? I always say study. I love studying. I love learning. The wonderful thing about being an academic is you actually learn all the time, and you learn from the students as much as you learn, from delivering the course. So, participate in forums like this. We live in a wonderful world where there's an enormous amount of free online courses. So there's all sorts of things you can do. And paid courses as well, formal courses.
Oh yes, you should all sign up for the MBA.
That's right. One of the biggest things we say students tell us they get out of it is confidence, which is interesting.
And that's so much of, I talk to potential students every day, and so much of it is about, I guess, giving a kind of confidence that it's all okay, that they are good enough, that some of their concerns actually aren't something to be too worried about. There's ways around it.
And it's that sometimes it's that imposter syndrome. I'm not really I don't really deserve to be in this position. If somebody finds out, you know, realize I'm an imposter. And we all have it to an extent, you know. That's why I'll go away and do lots of courses, good guy. But yeah, but I think knowledge gives you confidence that you are okay and that you are doing the right thing, you are heading in the right direction, or that, hey, that's a really innovative idea and I might trial that. You know, it might work for me. I'll see if I can do that.
Excellent. There's a couple questions more,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm interested in how long you'd like to spend talking about the MBA, whether you'd like to talk much about it this week.
I'm just open to see what questions there are.
Yeah, cool.
We've also got the MBA. We've got one on Wednesday next week at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, I've got a webinar.
Yep, and that might be recorded. Would it be?
It'll certainly be recorded, and
Yep.
yeah, we should put it on the course page. So everyone who's in this short course and in this webinar will get an email about that. So jump in. Kath's talking with Martin Hale, the CEO of IT Masters. We'll be talking about the differences between the CSU course and the CSU and IT Masters course. So that'll be fun. All right, so any questions that come in, we'll answer them. But perhaps we'll just go through the rest of the questions. There's probably a couple more I'll go with. And there's a bit of a value judgment from Anoop, who's saying Nelson Mandela, for example, is a leader and Donald Trump is a boss manager. Is that a correct understanding, you know, from what we've said today?
So Jane Caro, I don't know if many people know who she is. She wrote a really interesting article. What did she say? Something about, I can't remember. It was something about political leaders being bullies, and she made a nod to that sort of machismo leadership where it's about bluster and competition and aggression and finding an other to hate, and you know, if there isn't an other to sort of like hate, then you can make one up. Or, you know, like just choose another country, like, you know, the Axis is evil or something like that. So I think Trump takes that sort of very sort of machismo leadership style where it's about aggression, it's about, you know, big is best, and, you know, power is important and I'm really important. I just issue orders and, you know, and Twitter stuff. Whereas Nelson Mandela took a long time. He took the long, slow path. He worked with people. And even when after he was released from jail, despite being jailed for 26 years, when he came to power, he didn't seek to punish those others that had really treated him and his fellow Africans appallingly. He actually tried to find a path to work together with them. So I think, you know, it is a really good assessment, and that they are totally different approaches. Yeah, I don't know that Donald Trump does much managing, though.
Perhaps a fair bit of bossing.
Yeah.
But there would be people that hold that, you know, that boss approach is more effective and therefore, like, you know, utilitarian sort of way, the best way to do things. Is that fair? Or like
it can work. I mean, obviously in some cultures too, like that's what they look for in a leader. So and different times. So history has shown us that at times of sort of like poor economics or times of crises, then people sought a very autocratic leader. And so, you know, that happened with Putin, and that's why he became extremely popular, and now his popularity's waned somewhat. It happened in the war time. So, you know, like it can happen that people are seeking that at different times, but then when times change, they get disillusioned with that person because they didn't deliver, or, you know, they made it too autocratic or whatever, and so it moves on. So it does happen that different leaders are made of their time.
Interesting. Maybe the final question for tonight. There's a couple of questions about the MBA, but I'll get in touch with those people because it's sort of people that have already applied. I actually know one more coming. Leonie, will we be talking about generational leadership either in this short course or is it in the MBA?
So we're going to cover off on different generations, I think either next week or the week after. No, the week after, week 4. Yeah, like there's certain subjects in the MBA if you choose them, like for example, organisational behaviour looks at generational differences. Leadership does look at, you know, different leadership subjects do touch on that depending on the subject. So it's within some various subjects. If that's something of particular interest, I'm always happy to give people, you know, the subjects where I think it's covered off in most. But we will look at it in week 4.
Awesome. Alrighty, well, I reckon maybe we'll leave it there. We've kept people back a little bit, so thanks for everyone for sticking around.
Yeah.
And thanks for hanging around for another webinar. Thank you to Hannah for looking after the chat and for being so damn swaggy.
That's right.
Thank you, Kath, and unknown family members' names for a wonderful webinar. Really looking forward to next week. All of the resources should be available now. And come along to that webinar next week. That's on Wednesday. So hopefully we'll all talk to you then. Yep. I'll leave it to you, Kath, to sign off. And thank you very much, of course.
Okay, thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.